Hi, ladies and gents. So we are at the fun stuff. We get to talk about the Greek world and culture. And today specifically, we're going to be talking about myths and legends and all sorts of wonderful things that the Greeks left behind for us to enjoy. Some of those stories that you guys told me that you enjoyed. So you guys are doing a fantastic job doing your Reader's Theater for Greek mythology. So let's hear a little bit more about some of the things the Greeks believed with their gods and goddesses, and also how they kind of enjoyed the time they spent together. And I think you'll see, guys, that a lot of the stories that the Greeks had are the direct descendants of stories that we have today, all those big superhero stories. So you guys are going to love some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So buckle in. So when we look at Greek beliefs, the Greek people were united by a common culture. We know that they were very isolated from each other geographically, and they had lots of differences, but there were certain things that all Greeks had in common. For example, they all spoke the Greek language. They shared beliefs and traditions, and they believed in the same myths or traditional stories about gods and heroes. So who were some of these Greek gods? We talked about some of them in class, but here's some of the big ones. They believed in gods and goddesses, but in Greek myths, the gods had great powers but acted human. So they were jealous sometimes. They got angry. They were impatient, or, they had all of the kind of positive and negative characteristics that a human would have. So a lot of times the stories of the Greek gods reflect that. You see one character getting jealous of another, or another person acting just kind of on impulse because they thought it would be a good practical joke, or because they thought something would be fun. And it causes a lot of problems. So the Greeks were able to see their own lives in the stories of their gods and goddesses, and kind of reflecting the same kind of trials and tribulations that people went through. So the Greeks believed that the 12 most important gods lived on Mount Olympus, and this is a real place in Greece. You could go visit it today, and this is Greece's highest mountain. Okay, now you can climb Mount Olympus, but in the ancient world, not many people did. So it was more fun to imagine this highest place was kind of the home of the gods, because of course the gods would be up above anywhere else. And to win the favor of their gods, the people of any individual polis or city-state would perform rituals. Rituals are ceremonies or certain ways of praising that could be repeated over and over. And people perform these rituals in hopes that the gods would reward them. So sometimes these would be singing a certain song, saying a prayer. It just kind of depended on the god. Different gods might have different things they liked. For example, something to Ares, the god of war, might be a little bit different than to Athena, the god of wisdom, or the goddess of wisdom. That main god that everyone worshipped as the chief god was Zeus. So here's Zeus. He was the god of thunder, and so he's kind of the sky god. And Greeks participated in athletic competitions to celebrate and worship Zeus. The most famous of these is the Olympics, or Olympia. Or they took place rather in Olympia, and they were called the Olympic Games. So citizens from all over Greece would come and represent their polis in a friendly competition and kind of see who was the best polis and who had won the favor of Zeus. And it was a much easier way to kind of battle and compete than going to war, which we all know did not end well for the Greeks when they went to war for each other. So the Olympics were a way for all those different polises to compete and see who was best, but not necessarily all the death and destruction. Now let's look at some more Greek beliefs. The future and the will of the gods was very important to the Greeks. They believed that each person had a fate or destiny, something that the gods had in store for them. And a lot of the stories and myths of Greek legend deal with the fact that if you try to change your fate, bad things will happen. But of course, humans like to know the future. We don't like not knowing what's going on. So to find out about their future, Greeks would often visit an oracle, which was a sacred shrine or temple where a priest or priestess spoke for a god. The most famous was at a place called Delphi, and the oracles of Delphi would get people from all over Greece to come visit. And we figured out as scientists that the Oracle of Delphi, the temple, was built over or near a volcano. And so there were fumes coming from underground that would often put the priests and priestesses into these trances. So the Greeks believed that these messages that these priests or priestesses would have would come from the gods and tell them something about their future. So we see records of these oracles in history, but also in myths and legends from ancient Greece as well. Now, whether you know it or not, you're probably familiar with some of the stories from ancient Greece. In fact, Greek poems and stories are some of the oldest literature in Western civilization. And remember, Western civilization is the Western world, the Western hemisphere. So a lot of the stories that we see in movies and books have been passed down today. Everything from the Avengers to Percy Jackson takes themes from these old stories. The first Greek stories were epics, and these are stories of heroes and gods and goddesses. And over to the side, I want you to write, by epic, I want you to write hero, okay? An epic hero. An epic doesn't just mean cool, it means this grand adventure here. A poet named Homer wrote two of the greatest epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, inspired by a war between Greece and Troy. You might be familiar with the Trojan horse. Now, the story of the Trojan horse is one of the myths that you guys are going to retell in your Reader's Theater. This story tells of this grand war that lasted for years and years and years between Greece and Troy, and how the Greeks won. And then the Odyssey, the second book, tells about Odysseus, one of the heroes of the war, and his journey home. And a journey that should have taken just a couple months that ended up taking 10 years because he got into all sorts of trouble with the gods, and he goes on these great adventures. Now, these epics were more than just stories to the Greeks. They served as inspiration for the Greeks to be as courageous and the best person they could be. I want you to circle the word epics and the word inspiration. Okay, just like today, when we look at stories like the Avengers or Harry Potter or any big kind of story that you can think of characters that have strong characteristics and that kind of show us what a hero looks like. So these epics were the superhero stories of ancient Greece. But there's also another kind of story that taught more of a lesson. And these are called fables. The most famous were created by a man named Aesop around 550 BC. And these were short stories that taught a moral or useful lesson. Fables often used animals that act and speak like humans. You might be familiar with, for example, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, or the fable of the tortoise and the hare. There's a Bugs Bunny one about it, where the tortoise and the hare are running a race, and the hare gets lazy really close to the end, and the tortoise, slow and steady, ends up winning the race. Okay? So these were often geared towards children, which leads me to our hot question. Why do you think most of Aesop's characters were animals rather than humans? How might people react to a story about animals rather than humans? If we remember that the point of a fable is to teach a lesson, why might Aesop have chosen animals? Okay, so think about kind of what we might be willing to hear from animals that we might not be willing to hear from a human. Now, the last part we're going to look at is the impact of Greek drama. The ancient Greeks created and performed the first dramas, and I don't mean, oh, sad, ha, ha, ha. A drama is a play, kind of like what you guys are doing with your Reader's Theater. In ancient Greece, there were two types of dramas or plays, tragedy and comedy. Okay, and they were always performed on the stage. So you would get together, just like we might go see a movie today, and there would be tragedies and comedies. I want you to circle that word drama, and above it, just write plays. Okay, like if you go to drama club with Miss Russell, you're going to put on a play. Or if you take a drama class, you will learn how to put on both comedies and tragedies, happy plays and sad plays. We also have some cultural diffusion, Greek art and architecture. The ancient Greeks excelled in this. That means they were amazing at it. So classical Greek art set these really high standards of beauty that we admire today. And every Greek city-state had a temple dedicated to a god or goddess. So for example, this Parthenon, this is in Athens, it's up at the top of the Acropolis. So in addition to being that highest hill, there was a temple up there too. So we've got these large columns, and I want you to circle columns, put some stars by columns. We see the columns, boop, 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 columns everywhere, that supported these Greek buildings have inspired many of our own buildings, such as the White House. Cultural diffusion. And this is Lincoln Memorial down here. So if you go to Washington, D.C., or even Tallahassee, many times you will see, in kind of respect for the Greeks, these columns. We're calling back to the Greeks. We want to remind people of all of the great accomplishments of the Greeks, like democracy and architecture and art and literature and drama, and we want to make that connection for ourselves. We're going to continue looking at some of these accomplishments in class, guys. Please come in Thursday with these notes completed and ready to go so that we can continue our study of ancient Greece. Have a great day, guys.